Welcome to my channel AI Basics with AK. Here we are with another new episode, lists and tuples. Let's directly jump into our topic for today. Lists and tuples episode 8. So today we will discuss about lists, its basic operations, tuples and its basic operations. And in the next episode, we will discuss about more advanced operations of lists like append, etc. Now, how do you define as a list? List, we define it with a square brackets. If you can see it here, we can describe it with a square brackets. Here, inside the square brackets, there are no elements. That's why it is an empty list. Okay. Now, here in the second part of the code, we have discussed 4 integers inside those square brackets, and this variable becomes a type of a variable list, and inside this list, okay, we can access these individual elements like how we have done it using string indexing. So this is a 0 index, this is 1, 2 and 3. Accordingly, we can access those individual list items using indexing of lists as well, where the required elements can be extracted using its respective address index. Also, it's not only that we have to define a particular variable type inside the list. We can also define each list item in a separate variable type. Here you can see it is a string, this is a boolean and this is an integer. You can see that this is also a list. We can describe in this fashion also. You just think a list is like a bucket and you just keep this bucket in an ordered items kind of a thing. Here we can also define list as a nested list. Here this is list 1, this is list 2 and this is list 3. You can see that the print type of this variable 0, which is nothing but this first list, is nothing but a list. And you can access this particular first element of this list again using further indexing, using your type of variable 0, which access this first part of the index. And inside that, okay, if you want to access this, the sub part, this is 0, 1, 2. And also, like I mentioned it as first list and second list and third list. However, in indexing, this is 0th index, this is first index and this is a second index. Okay, so this is a basic defining of a list. You can define a list in a square brackets, and you can define and you can keep any variable type in those square brackets, and also you can keep the list, which is itself a variable type, also in the list itself. That's why it becomes a nested list. Now let's see some basic mathematical operations that we see it every time. If we multiply by a number, what happening is that it is repeating 5 times. It means it is concatenating here. But the moment we try to add, the moment we try to either add or divide or subtract accordingly, it throws an error where it gives a type error mentioning that it can only concatenate a list. It cannot do an integer operation. Also, the divided by, it is an unsupport operand. I cannot do it. So this is an error it throws to the screen that, okay, I am not capable of understanding what you have given. That's why it is a typo error. Now let's see further basic operations. Since we have given it as an integer, let's see that whether we can do it in this fashion. Now, same thing, if we add two lists of unequal dimensions, it's still concatenates. But as we discussed here, none of them works, because all these three are type errors, because it cannot do that. Okay, the one says that, okay, subtraction is not supported, it cannot multiply the sequences, and it cannot divide the sequence, because it's separate lists. Okay, so at this point of time, only the addition operator is only successful so far, and remaining all other mathematical operators we cannot perform on the list. What is addition is doing? It is just concatenating it. But when we discuss a better operators in the next week, okay, especially append, extend, etc., you feel that, okay, these operators are useless. Okay, this is just an understanding and experimenting that I'm going to the giving it to the readers, such that people who are new to this programming can appreciate and understand the list operations that we discuss in the next week. Okay, coming back to our subject. Now here we have defined a variable list which has three integer elements, 1, 2 and 3. Now we have accessed this first index variable, which is 1, and then assigned a 10. And then when we try to print that variable, it has changed. Beautiful, right? So what we have learned is that we can access these indices and then change and manipulate those values and assign a different value. Automatically the list values itself changes. Similarly, we can assign this variable to another variable, and then further we have changed. So the variable 2 contains 10, 2 and 3, where its respective index address is 0, 1 and 2. Further, we have accessed the 0th index address and then assigned a value of 100. Now, if we can see it out here, we have printed where, not where2. You would ask me, in our assignment operators episode that we have learned about the box and then reference, that if we assign a variable 1 with 1 and then further assign a variable to this variable 1, which is nothing but this is assigned with a value of 1, and further we are updating this variable var with respect to 5, but when we are printing the variable 1, this is not changing, because the variable is referring it to a placeholder of that particular integer value. But you may ask, why in this particular list it is getting changed? Because lists are mutable. When it gets changed, okay, the references also gets changed. If you do not want to get it changed, you have to use a different operation which is called as var.copy. When we use var.copy, you can see that the list doesn't change if one of the lists get changed. It is because it is copying, it is creating two different sets. It is not pointing to the same lists. Okay, so assume that this is a list, okay, and then you have pointed variable 1 and then you are pointed here variable 2, say for example. When these lists are getting changed, both these variable values are getting changed. But here what we are doing is that we are copying two different lists and then we are pointing variables as two different variable pointers here. So if one of these list values get changed, this variable is not aware what is happening here. So it only refers to these elements but not to these elements, because there are two separate copies of lists. Okay, so this is about the basic lists, about defining and about accessing and about modification of the lists, and then doing basic addition is just concatenating of the lists. Now just let's jump into tuples. Tuples is mostly similar to lists, and maybe I'll quickly skim through these examples because you will feel it is most on similar lines except one element of nuances. Now here you can see it here. We define a list with a parenthesis. You open a parenthesis and you close the parenthesis. Without any elements in it, it creates an empty tuple. On similar lines of list that we have seen it earlier, which is a square and closing a square, here empty parenthesis. And inside this parenthesis, if we define some integer elements, automatically this becomes a non-empty list containing some 4 elements inside this tuple. Sorry, it's not a list, it is a tuple. Now you can access these elements inside a tuple using the same indexing that we have learned even in string as well as in just lists. And all these elements in this list has a type of variable integer that we have already defined it as an integer. Similar to list, it's just not only for single variable type, we can define multiple variable types as well, like string, boolean, and then integer. Exactly similar to what we have seen in list, we can just do only addition as a mathematical operator which just concatenates. Any other operator like multiplication, subtraction, or division, it throws an error which is nothing but a type error. Here, if you can see it out here, when we are defining a single variable, okay, this becomes a mathematical operation. So it multiplies 3 into 3 and gives a 9 because this is not a tuple. If you want to define this as a tuple, you have to define a one element as a tuple. You have to define it like this. Open a parenthesis, 3, comma, and then close the parenthesis. Then this is, you can call this as a tuple. Because if you just define this 3 without any comma inside it, Python recognizes that as an integer and not as a tuple. So that's the reason when we have multiplied this into this, it has given an value of 9, but it has not concatenated the variable 3 times. That we have seen similarly in list, that you can see it in the example here as well. We have used the same example where 1 comma 3 and we have multiplied 3 times. It concatenated this tuple 3 times as well as it concatenated this list 3 times. Also, we can convert a list into a tuple by using a word tuple. So here we have defined a list with a square brackets 1, 2, 3. You can convert this into a tuple by mentioning it a keyword tuple inside this parenthesis and mentioning that variable as list1. Automatically this tuple becomes a variable type tuple, and this list which we have defined within the square brackets is automatically a variable type of it's a type of variable list. Okay, similarly we can define a tuple and also convert into a list by using the list as a keyword. Beautiful, right? So maybe I have just quickly skimmed through it because most of the examples that we have seen it in list are almost similar, except this one. Here you can see that when we have defined a variable 1, 2, and 3, and we are trying to change the first index value, that is here we have 3 index values, right? 0, 1, and 2, and we are trying to change Instead of accessing the first element, we have accessing that first element and trying to assign a value of 10, like the one that we have seen it in lists a couple of slides before, right? That we have seen it here. The moment we try to do in that fashion, it is throwing an error that it does not support this assignment. Why? Because tuple is non-mutatable. You cannot change the items inside it. You have to create a new variable and then assign it in this fashion. Here, say for example, I want to change, instead of 1 2 3, I want to create a new tuple 10 to 3. What you have to do it out is that you have to create a new variable, concatenate using an plus assignment that we have learned in the previous slide, and then accessing using those indices is the same accessing that we have learned in our string indexing. You can, so you cannot mutate the same variable. You have to create a new variable and create our own versions of what we how we want to mutate that, but in a different variable. However, in list you can modify it in the same list variable. That's the only difference that we have discussed so far. In the next episode we will further discuss more nuances on the list operations, which is much more powerful and much more interesting. Okay, that's it for today's episode. And quickly we'll try to jump into today's demo session, where we'll just perform the same operations that we have discussed so far. And as usual, before jumping to our demo session, quickly let's go through our homework. This is our homework 8th, and you can just comment your GitHub link or Jupyter Python notebook link by uploading into Google Drive and etc., such that I can review it or can get it reviewed it from the experts. So for today's episode, we have one theory question and one a programming question. We have discussed it. If you had listened to this complete episode, maybe you can answer this first question: what is the difference between a list and a tuple? What is the fundamental difference? And the question 2, say for example, given a list of integers, you have to define a function or define whatever it is. What you have to do it out is that you would have learned or listened to the previous for loop episode. So you try to use this list as an iterator into those for loop, and then ensure that you add those elements inside that list such that the final sum after that for loop we generate an answer 10. Okay, that's it. Let's jump to our demo. See you there. But this is a little bit more interactive for the people who would want to learn programming from basics. So let's define an empty list for last an empty list is created. You can see that. Now let's create a list which contains numericals inside it. Let's call 1, maybe 10, maybe 20 and 100. You can see that the numbers, integers, are already created. Say for example, let's modify some of them into float. Say 10.2. You can see that we have created some floats and integers. Let's check whether is it actually float. Let's print the type of variable by accessing its index, which is 0. Now you can see that it is a class of float. However, in this view, you can always tell very clearly that it is recorded as float, because here you can see that it is recorded as 10.2, whereas the integers does not have any decimals only float has a decimal. Now let's do the quick mathematical operation that we have learned. Let's define variable 1, 2, say 1, 2 and 3, and let's create another variable by adding variable 1 plus 5. What will happen? It is creating a type error. It can only concatenate list but not integer. So what we'll do is that let's convert this into a list. The moment you concatenated it, then another variable got created by concatenating this list element 5 into this variable 1, which is 1, 2 and 3, and then it concatenated with 5. Say for example, can we concatenated multiple list items? Of course you can do it. Say for example, I'm creating here a list 5, 6 and 7. Automatically the variable 2 got created with a list of 6 items, where first 3 items is picked from variable 1 and second list is created dynamically in this assignment itself. Beautiful, right? In the same way, let's create a variable 3 by using a multiplication operator, but not using multiplying as a list, because it will throw an error because it says it cannot multiply. But the moment we multiply it as a string, you can see that 5 times this 1 2 3 got appended. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and for the fifth time 1 2 and 3. Beautiful, right? Now let's try to change some of these elements. Now let's access this variable 1 and change the float into an integer. So let's create a 40. Now the moment I wrote it here, automatically this got changed into 40 here. You can see that this got changed into 40. Beautiful, right? And let's create another variable. Variable 1 is equal to variable, it got assigned the same values, and the moment I change again variable 0 is equal to 100, both of them got changed because it's the same list. Now let's jump into tuples. Empty tuple, you can create in this fashion. Here you can see it here, a tuple got created which is an empty tuple. In the same fashion, let's create variable tuple here. In the same, here the variable here we have created as 10.20 10 20 and 100, which is in a list. We have created a same in a tuple. Sorry. Okay. I have just changed the variable name. It doesn't even mind, but yeah, it's better to keep it as the same naming convention. So instead of list, I have to create it as a tuple. So here you can see that this tuple has 4 items. If we click on it, this 4 items tuples has 10 floating uh, floating decimal number, integer 10, integer 20 and integer 100. In the same way, let's do this mathematical operation that we had seen it out here. Variable 2 underscore tuple is equal to, let's create this tuple which we have seen it out, because only if it is 1 comma 0, only then it is a tuple. The moment you remove this comma, this becomes just an integer. Only you put a comma, Here you can see that it became a tuple. You can see the difference, right? And say I'm multiplying it by 5 times, it means right now the 5 items got created wherein the 1 got appended 5 times. Now let's create a third variable using a plus symbol operator. Now this is one tuple and this is second tuple. Now that's why we have here 4 items wherein it got appended 1, 3 and then 10, 20 got appended. Can we append list and a tuple? No. But however, we can mutate those things and add them. How? Say for example, we can create another variable 4 and tuple by defining one as a tuple and say for example another as a list. Ideally we cannot do it, so it throws an error. But moment you convert this into a tuple, there is no error. The variable 4 got created and tuples got created. Now instead of tuples, say for example if you want to convert them into a list, here you have to say that this is a list and this we did not need to typecast it. Automatically the variable 5 got created. Now finally let's do an assignment operator. Of course it has to throw an error, but let's check it out. So say for example for variable 5 we want to change. Let's print this variable first. What is there? We have 1. Now say for example we want to change this value of 1 into say 100. This will change. Why? Because the variable 5 is a list. Now if I want to change the variable 4, we will get an error. It says that it does not support item assignment. How do we create new elements? Like how we have created here new tuples as per our own wish, we can create it, or either by indexing. That's it for today's episode. See you in the next week. If you like this episode, please give a like and do subscribe for more learning. And don't forget to share it to your friends and especially freshers who are new to this coding. See you. Bye bye.